Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing this morning? It's a bit chilly, so I appreciate you all getting up, although perhaps not as chilly as it was on the weekend. Welcome to the LSO breakfast. Special welcome also for those of you in the room, if you didn't know, that we are webcasting. So I know there's people online in Guelph, etc. So welcome to them as well. We do have a list of those attending the breakfast. You might not find everybody here who's on the list. That's not because they couldn't get up this morning. That's because if you registered for webcast, they're also on the list. So if you don't recognize them, then that's where they are. Everybody who is registered for the breakfast, you've got a contact list. We will be doing lots of ability to network afterwards, so please go around and chat with people and you can connect. We're not going to get up and say what we all do there. It's a bit hard for the webcasting people to do that. A couple of other one other housekeeping issue. We have these fancy microphones now, and that's because we need those microphones. Oh, is my microphone on? That's helpful for the full webcasting. Thank you. So if you want to ask a question when we get to the question part, you use the microphone. It's red. It should be flashing red. You just turn it on so it flashes green. Ask your question, but you do need to hold the microphone close to your face so that the people on the casting can hear. And then after your question's finished, please turn it back to red again, because otherwise then we get that whole feedback thing. It's not so fun for the people with earphones in elsewhere. There we go. That's my instructions for the day. So I'm going to actually go right ahead and introduce our first speaker. I was just told, so God probably will not appreciate me saying this, but looking back at the records, God was one of the first we could find in the records in 1998 for speaking. So that's not to say that God's been around for a long time. That's to say God's made a great contribution and continues to make a great contribution to the sector, so we continue to ask it to come back more than 20 years later. I could read this. I encourage you all, when you have a bit of time and not during the talks, to read his whole bio that's in here. So it really does speak to how important God has been to the sector. So important that he's won lots and lots of awards around distinguished service to the sector. All of the sector, biotech, agriculture, etc. He's a very strong advocate for Canadian agriculture, for opportunities that Canada has in the marketplace. I know in my personal business, at OGI, as we reached out more to the agriculture sector, God has been a great resource and a great help and really made a difference. So I encourage you, if you have time, to chat with God. He did retire as president of the Ontario Agri-Food Technologies just recently. I'm not sure that's made any difference to how busy he is and how much work he's doing. But welcome, God. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much, Allison. It is a pleasure to get down into Toronto again. Just thinking back, it was 15 years ago, myself, Ken Knox, and Bruce Archibald were back starting Ministry of Energy, Science and Technology up the road, and at that time I think there were only 13 employees, so things grow. Okay. You have my CV. I'm about to talk to you about game changing in agriculture. As indicated, my heart is in fundamental agriculture. I didn't grow up on a farm. I grew up in Newmarket, Ontario, though, just road. My dad had a menswear store, my mom and dad. But I got 50 out of 50 in my bug collection, and I became an entomologist and went on to do head of plant research at the University of Guelph, all those kinds of things. But what I want to start with is by thanking LSO, one, for the opportunity to be down here. I'm going to give you a little background on agriculture as we go forward, but the opportunity to speak. Allison, and Jason, a wonderful working relationship that has gone back. Was brought down by Ken Knox when we did the biotechnology strategy. Mark was there way back then. I remember that too. So, and you've recognized what I call a lot of Aggies, agricultural people, and I'm happy to say, once again, a couple of Aggies, Deb Stark and John Oliver, are going to be recognized at this week's gala. So it's been a great relationship, and it will continue to work. I've made sure that my replacement knows about that. And one of the things I do want to stress, and we'll get into the science and some of the things that are happening, is that agriculture isn't just about food and feeding us. It is an economic engine of this province. And that's one thing that we don't get into Queen's Park and downtown Toronto that often, but we do all right for ourselves. So, as indicated, I just stepped down from Ontario Agri-Food Technologies as the president. I hit that magic 65, and I said, well, I'm going to retire, and it was 2 weeks before I took on some special assignments. But it's a collaboration of our farmer organizations, industry, universities, government, and we have affiliations with economic development, trade. But ultimately, we get a fair block of money from our funding partners, which are the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, our Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs. That name keeps changing all the time, but that's the correct one now. I just don't change it anymore when government changes, because it always comes back. And our mandate is to work with primary agriculture and the food industry and to ensure that agriculture has access to the latest technologies to compete in a global economy. You know, genetically modified foods are part of that technology. And I emphasize the word access. Farmers, users of the technology, and we'll talk about others besides farmers, can determine whether or not they want to use it, but access is the key word. And to create new market opportunities for business, for the business of agriculture. We have what I call the religion of agriculture and the business of agriculture. And that's beyond, much of that is beyond traditional food and feed markets. And we're going to show you a number of those markets really coming up. So when you think of traditional agriculture, think of corn and, you know, food on your plate, wheat, bread, meat, fish, all kinds of things. And we are in the food and feed business, but in reality, we have met that challenge. This is The Economist of 2003. That epidemic of obesity continues to. You can argue that we ultimately provide a lot of business for the medical fraternity. It's called type 2 diabetes. It's called hypertension. I take my cholesterol pills in the morning, that kind of stuff. But ultimately, you know, our challenge had been to feed the world, have more calories, more protein per person than ever in the history of mankind. And technology is the main reason we do that. When I was born in Newmarket, we got 65 bushels of corn, 45 bushels of corn per acre. I'm 65, mine says 45 bushels of acre. Now we get 200 bushels of corn per acre through technology, traditional breeding, those kinds of things. But that evolution of feeding people has resulted in a number of things. I love this one. People get the fact that food is always going to be there, it's going to be cheap. And if you look at, you ask the question, do you want to see genetically modified food labeled? 82% of the people say, yes, I want to see that food labeled. If you ask them, do you want to see your food labeled if it has DNA? 80% say yes. We have a problem in communication. But that also is good when we talk to government and we want mandatory, and then you say, well, ask them if they want DNA too, because we'll be labeling absolute here. So we have issues associated with food. Farmers' return, food spending, the farmer share. When you buy food in a grocery store, first of all, the food is probably in today's society about 15% of your disposable income. Theoretically, we can only eat so much, and the ability to produce goes up, and 15% of your income 10 to 15% may go for food. The thing I want to emphasize, the primary producer of that food only gets 17% of that 15% of the food dollar. So your Food Freedom Day in Canada is February the 12th, same day as Darwin's birthday. And Food Freedom Day for farmers, when you pay for all the farm food that is grown, January the 8th. So the question I keep asking, are we trying to move that to New Year's Day? And the answer is no. We're coming up with other solutions for society, and that's something we'll talk about today. So if I look at agriculture in Ontario, unfortunately we had the Premier as the minister for a year. So Ottawa's back in charge now, largest sector in Ontario. We put the food processing industry in there as well. We have over 3,000 food processing companies in Ontario. Provides 1 in 5 jobs. Right now we have about 57,000 farms in Ontario, 1/4 of all those in Canada. That number keeps shrinking. When I began, it was 250,000. So we have fewer farms getting bigger, and technology is allowing that to happen, primarily on the equipment side. We use robotics a lot now and milking, all those kinds of things. We're the second largest food production region in all of North America. Chicago beats us, arguably maybe LA too. And at that time, now again, Ottawa's back. Single greatest driver in Ontario's bioeconomy. If you look at bioproducts, food ingredients, alternative energy, nutraceuticals, and we are a major exporter from this province. I want to emphasize that we're also a major import food. We don't grow a lot of citrus in the middle. We don't grow a lot of citrus, period. But in the middle of winter, we don't grow a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables. Though actually, if you look at tomatoes, cucumbers, and peppers, we're the largest producer in all of North America, even at this time of year, down in Leamington, where Al works a lot and knows. You can see a 100-acre greenhouse. So we're 83%, 83,000 jobs, 9.9, and that down cycle of 2008-9. Our food industry was not really affected. We all have to eat. Is one of the good things that we have going for us. Total farm receipts increased, and we reduced our reliance on any kind of government payments, those kinds of things, by a significant numbers, and continue to do so as long as our commodity prices stay high. We export about $10 billion of food and finished food. I want to emphasize that. We work very much on getting out of the commodity business, shipping bushels of corn or bushels of soybeans, and give you the tofu, the finished products that we sell internationally. So creating the value in our food processing industry is something key. Here are some of the things. Pet foods is a big area we work on, sugar, confectionaries, all of these types of things. And that's what people think of as agriculture. And I want to try to move that a bit forward. And the other key thing I do emphasize is integration with our food processors. We work with them all the time. 65% of what we grow on the farm is processed, further processed, value added, if we use the lingo here with our food industry. A lot of it in Toronto. I do emphasize taxes are moving, logistics, gridlock is moving out of Toronto, but at the same time, we do have a huge amount here. Well, London, Ontario's got a big food processing area, Brantford. Our Premier we have a Premier Summit on Agriculture every year, so we want to be one of the top 10 jurisdictions in farm cash receipts. This is on the farm side, not the food processing, and continue to be among the 5 top jurisdictions in North America. We should be pretty good because of the US-Canadian dollar ratio. Suddenly our competitive opportunities have increased. We have had some major negatives in electrical prices being one, and doubled our agri-food exports. So that's the challenge that we've been given, and the key is that what kind of exports are we looking at? So that inner circle is the traditional. I'm moving out into, you're going to see a lot of hard parts today, chemicals, plastics, diesels. I want to talk about that side of the equation. All right, here's a little, I actually sat next door to the scientist, Chris Hall. Plant Forum launches a $20 million private equity. I got some real recent data here. Here's January 26. Plant Forum, we can now grow in tobacco. The Herceptin, I'm not pronouncing these right, I'm sure, but we've done a lot of work in developing the #1 cancer drug, not developing it, but producing it in tobacco in a biological system. This company has had major contracts with the US military for antibodies to nerve gases. They're now producing, when you see the things in Kentucky being grown, the actual tobacco is started in Ontario with Plant Forum. So we are in the medical side of the world as well. And it's a very different area. When you think of medical side of the equation, DNA barcoding, that's the big center is at the University of Guelph. We have over 2 million species, and in 24 hours we can do DNA barcoding and tell you whether or not that's what you say it is. It's been highly used in fish. If you want red snapper, there's a lot of fraud goes on. And I'm here to tell you there's a lot going on in the herbal medicine market. If you look at things and you think you're getting echinacea and most of these, I'm going to say there's a much higher probability you're not getting what you think you are. And here's the New York just cracked down on fraudulent herbals. The top 4 of the top 5 selling brands contain none of the herbs listed on the label. I mean, that has been going on and been identified in our DNA barcoding unit at 12. And we have a company, True ID, spun out of that, to answer these questions in the business world. So we look at it as the bioeconomy, so moving beyond food and feed. I'm just going to give you some stats ahead of time. We've invested, the private sector, since 2005, $1.5 billion in hard concrete in facilities in the province of Ontario related to bioeconomy. We're currently on the books $1 billion of further commitment going on in construction. I mean actual building of production sites. By far the biggest is biofuels. We have major program here. If you fill up your car, I can guarantee that at this price point, it's probably 5% of your gasoline will be ethanol. When gas is at 100, it'll be 10% is ethanol. But we have some major facilities throughout southwestern Ontario producing ethanol. But I do emphasize, and I'll show you in a second, they're moving into a lot more products than just ethanol. So the biofuels is where the big one is. Biodiesel is another key area, 4%. If you have a truck or a bus and you fill it up with diesel, 4% is coming from the bioeconomy. And I would emphasize, if we make ethanol, we use yeast, we use genetic engineering like crazy in our enzyme production and our yeast, our microbial organisms, we're doing that more. And I'm here to say that I tell our farmers our #1 livestock is going to be microbes. And it's happening faster and faster and faster. Right now, about 1/3 of the corn crop in the province of Ontario starts off in an ethanol plant. We go on to make feed and everything else, but it goes to feed yeast before it goes to feed a cow, a chicken, or us. By the way, when you have sweet corn, that's not the corn you're seeing out of the fields, okay? And we're moving into green chemistry. BioAmber is a classic, making succinic acid. That's a strong deicer. They've now spent $250 million. I just had some chats with them on another issue, and we're on the world radar screen. This is out of Sarnia, Murray McLaughlin and crew, and I happen to be on that Sustainable Chemistry Board as well. But here's another example. Specialty alcohols. Greenfield is an ethanol plant, most people think. Actually, they have 6,000 customers in the specialty alcohol business. Double distill, triple distill. You make it from corn, but all your hand sanitizers, they're #1 in all of America. So when you look at hand sanitizers, you look at toothpaste, you look at menthol, you look at the alcohols for sterilizing medical instruments, all came from Ontario. Greenfield specialty alcohols and growing like crazy. So we're converting some of our ethanol now into even more advanced ways of reinvesting. Here's our Chatham plant that will shift 75% to the industrial. Much higher margins in that business, so why not? Okay, BioAmber announced their succinic acid plant. That's a building blocks for a whole bunch of material, including biodegradable plastics, which we're going to be talking about. And what I did want to talk about is what we do at Ontario Agri-Food Technology. I'm getting down to some of the business side now. As we went through life, and I've been in that job since about 2000 as the president, and now retired. Keep having to remind myself of that. But one of the structural things that I noted, and where we had major problems in funding programs for industry, a lot of my members are industry as well, was on speed. Government cannot work at this, no offense, but government cannot work at the speed of business. I heard you use that goddamn, I had to say it. And I understand, if I'm asking for $5 million, I need a 9-month, 6-month due diligence process. But industry needs a lot of things a lot faster. So there should be, just as in medicine, a triage system of funding. We have, if you want $3 million, you go into this kind of block system. If you want $300,000, you go into this kind of system, which we have, and that one we make decisions in 6 weeks. Every 6 weeks we put out money. Our sweet spot's about $300,000. We put out a lot of money in that. And then we have another one where we put out money in 48 hours. 20,000 is the maximum, but in 48 hours, you've got your money on account. We need your receipt away you go. We have structurally, we don't have that in many of the systems. And I'm here to say that that's what industry has really, really needed. We're overwhelmed in these things. So we created a number of programs for industry. One is capacity building. We'll provide $10,000 to provide, I used to call it grant writing, but government didn't like that. And by the way, the money comes from a joint funding program called Growing Forward Canada and Ontario Ministry of Agriculture. So we call it capacity building. I'm a small company. I've got 20 employees. I'm focused on cash flow. I've never done a research grant proposal in my life. I don't know how to get the letters of support, all those kinds of things. Your probability of getting money out of a government program is, I'll put it at less than 10%. If you've got a great writer and a great idea, maybe. So what we do is provide a professional who goes in and helps the company, writes, does a lot of the financial analysis. We'll get the letters of support from the grower associations, whoever is needed. And the company must be willing to ask. So we got to make sure they got percent of their money, depending on what kind of government program. Some you need a 50% match, some a 30% match, have you. We have to ensure that they have that before we go any further. But that program has been incredibly successful. In the first 5 years, for about $500,000, we show $70 million of program funding, basically at a 50-50% ratio too. So the government, private sector put in $70 million to get the $70 million in public sector dollars, and we had a 70% success factor. The big companies, you know, University Health Network, or I got the hospital, they do it all the time. But if I'm a small company just starting with a great idea, the ability to draw that money, very low. Next one is rapid response to business opportunities. You know, I live by a quote, don't let your science and technology interfere with your sales. At the end of the day, we've got to do something with it. And we have to go global. As this country, anybody listens to Lynch, we have to go global. And in agriculture, we are going global in many ways. But how do I get, if I'm that small company and I want to go see the head of research and development for Volkswagen in Puebla, Mexico, we'll talk about. Or one that we did a lot of work with was ecosynthetics. I'm John Van Leeuwen, I need to go to Brazil. We're going to try our thing in a big pulp and paper mill. It's going to cost this much. 48 hours, again, all these things, the decisions are made in 48 hours. You got $10,000 on account, go. Show us the receipts when you're done. John Van Leeuwen's a classic. He was doing $1 million worth of sales. We sent him 3 times. Went from $1 million to 18 million and went public at 110 million. Basically, from Grant Tipler sent me up to the next place. It was 2 guys in a garage. Now they had a place back at Michigan State, but I thought when I first saw it, I told Grant at his retirement, I thought you were giving me something else. Nope. We can show in that program for $500,000, $500 million in global sales. Some of them were very big ones to China, to places like that. And then the other one, rapid response to research needs, again, this is $20,000. We'll make a decision in 48 hours. And I can stretch what constitutes research. Doing something new that's necessary is the way I really do it. That's not necessarily how government likes to hear it. So I've got a guy right now, this week, he's got an opportunity to make, believe it or not, dog food cookies at a $3 million opportunity in the pet serve in the U.S. He's in London, Ontario. He needs to have a full safety audit and have a whole educational program for his corporate so he can get that contract. Done, you got $1,000, we'll work with you. You got to spend your 22 and show us the receipts. Bang, away we go. But that's the kind of world that I work in. Is further down the line. I sit in an environment where I have the, I'm in the agricultural adaptation council, anyhow, with Bioenterprise, Mars Landing, the Guelph Agri-Food Technology Center, there we go. And I'm at the back end of this, working with companies that already exist. We have Bioenterprise at the front end, doing the business planning and getting mentors and all that kind of stuff. I don't stay in that area. I'm down. You got a product, how are we going to grow the business? So I'm going to finish before I turn this over to Adel. Most of us spend too much time on what is urgent and not enough time on what is important. I told you that we've met the food industry. We've met our ability to feed food for today. You know, we're going into a whole thing on climate change. We're going into a whole area of you know, what I will call more oversight. And I don't disagree with more oversight, but what we tend to forget as we go forward is the following. And if you can go look at the statistics, I've done the analysis, and this is the Ministry of Finance, growing in the human population in this country by about 136,000 people per annum. So that's another city of wealth every year coming on stream in the province of Ontario. To the greatness of this province, most of that is, by the way, through immigration and our cultural diversity that I so love in this province. But we also lose about 150,000 acres of agricultural land every year. It becomes Mississauga, Scarborough, all those kinds of areas. So our population is growing at 1%. Our land basis for agriculture is decreasing at 1%. By the year, and these are all projections by the Ontario Ministry of Finance, 2041, we're going to have another 3.3 million people in this province, which means I need another 3 million acres of land if all things were equal. This is why the technology that you all and we all as scientists are coming up is so critical. What I'm saying for Ontario is happening all around the world. So it's not like, well, we'll just open up more land. There are areas, I used to think of the Ukraine as a big area, and they've all got their own problems besides. They could have some of the best land, but they have other problems. So we have to think, you know, the next generation. When we talk, I'm having a little to do with the Ministry of Environment. We got to do this. Well, what about the next generation? We've got to find the equivalent in productivity of another 3 million acres of land if we're going to supply it. And that's assuming we're not losing any acres of land. I had my little rant on that one, but that's an important issue that this province has to think about. In the meantime, we got too much food, and we had to figure out a whole bunch of ways to use the non-food things. I'm happy to invite, I think I had one more slide here, but I'll just pass through that. This is just showing you other things going out in wealth. We have our Mars, but our Mars is horizontal, not vertical, with all the banks, all the companies, those kinds of things. Anybody that's ever been out there. We got a horizontal Mars rather than a vertical Mars. We'll do the question.